The Now and There campaign is actually a movement. It's to get the individuals, communities, community-based organizations, and local organizations, as well as state organizations and agencies involved together to come up with real solutions to address the mass incarceration of Black and brown boys and men. The Prison Expressway is a term that we coined of actual areas that needs to be addressed with mass incarceration, starting with criminal justice reform, economic security, community and family, as well as media, health, and education. We know that when we address these areas, we'll really come up with those hard and actual solutions to address mass incarceration.
Implicit bias, whether it's in a classroom, whether it's in a courtroom, whether it's among a judge and jury, what's been shown or sentencing has been much more severe the darker the skin tone of the defendant.
Unfortunately, many of the systems, the court systems here in Georgia and probably around the country, are ill-equipped. They just are underfunded to really have enough staff and support to have an intervention for that kid. So the main intervention is that kid getting arrested. The main intervention is him coming to court or her coming to court, and having a probation officer has too many cases and hopefully will check in on that kid. If these courts had more resources to be able to offer interventions and support, I believe that would significantly reduce the number of folks going into prison in the juvenile prison system.
I think one of the top policy changes that can be made to reduce youth incarceration has to be reducing sentencing for youth violence. I think that it's an opportunity that we have as citizens to say there may be a child who's had some difficulties in school, perhaps difficulties at home, and instead of sending them into a correctional system, we can have a diversionary program where they can be treated in a community setting. By preventing those youth from entering the correctional system, we're reducing the likelihood that they'll return as adults.
When we put in the 3 strikes you're out, the 2 strikes you're out, the mandatory minimum sentences, we built a trap for ourselves. It's too expensive to spend $40,000 to keep somebody in prison when you could send them to college at one of our metropolitan colleges for $1,000 a year. It's not good business, it's not good politics, and it's not good sense.
There must be some type of focus on retaining and getting the attention of Black, Latino males very early on to keep them in school, because the vast majority of the individuals who are incarcerated have not graduated from high school.
We talk about accountability a lot in education, but it's typically really with respect to individual test scores and an individual school year. I think that ultimately means that we're taking a longer-term view of the work that's happening in a classroom. So if we think about that with respect to incarceration, I think it's the same idea. You can track what percentage of kids coming from a particular school system, particular school, are getting incarcerated, and really begin to look at that data and start to track backwards and see what indicators did we see? What did we see in kindergarten? What did we see in middle school? What did we see in high school that would have led us to understand that a kid was on a path towards incarceration?
We need to keep our youth in school, and that means that schools must become more accountable. They need to track those students that they are losing and go and get them and bring them back, and they need to stop suspending students or expelling them for a year. There's nothing good out there for them, and we don't usually see them once they've been lost.
Ban the Box is a policy initiative that is gaining a lot of support across the country, and especially here in Georgia. Governor Nathan Deal is an advocate for banning the box, and what it basically means is that on an employment application, on most applications now, there is a question that asks if you've ever been convicted of a felony. And so the move to ban that question on all employment applications is picking up support. And we're very excited about that. That gives a person an opportunity to be considered equally amongst all candidates. We're under-tapping so much talent that could be active in our workforce and help us economically move our country forward. If we're going to grow as a community as a whole, if our region is going to be economically viable, we have to invest in our people.
we really have to look at what it means to have been incarcerated. Does this mean that an individual will never be able to get the type of life-sustaining positions that is needed to survive in society? And if that's the case, we have to seriously consider whether or not barriers to employment based upon incarceration should be something that we continue in this society.
Well, you know, incarceration is a public health issue because of the disparity in health outcomes that people who go behind the walls have. More mental health problems, more substance use problems, more problems with chronic disease.
There's no reason whatsoever that folks with substance abuse offenses need to be incarcerated for nonviolent crimes. What they need is treatment. We need to be putting those folks through diversionary courts and having them continue to work and do something productive while they're in treatment. Correctional systems don't do much in the way of rehabilitation, so they're going to come home with some of the same problems they went in with. They're going to need to have access to care and treatment. They're going to need the support of a family member or somebody who's going to help them navigate getting those services within the community.
Media has a grave impact on the incarceration and mass incarceration of youth. Media is an outlet for those that may not know personally youth that are incarcerated or might not experience it firsthand. They're the first person to report, to share information, facts that other people might not know. And when they report misinformation or don't report the true and full story, it really it broadens the disparities that these youth experience.
Organizations that work with parents, organizations that work with young people, organizations working with the media to show young people as they really are, what we know them as our children, as our sons, our daughters, as our siblings. That's the way you get the community involved. They have to see them as assets and have to recognize them as their own, because that's who they are.
We get youth sent to us who are failing school, who are joining gangs, who are using drugs, and the underlying reason that that's happening is because of some kind of trauma, some kind of family conflict, or some kind of unresolved situation that nobody's taking the time to address. Something that could be a very quick fix, but instead we just want them out of the classroom. We want to lock them up so that they don't bother anyone else. And what we're getting in return is we're getting a youth, an innocent youth, who is being sent into an environment where when they come out, they're very different youth.
And the reality is there's never been a more important time for our community to engage. Our kids need mentors, and especially our young guys need male mentors in their lives. There's tons of positive role models doing great things in our community. Our kids don't see enough examples of that. And so to the extent that we can showcase success for them, demonstrate for them that with hard work, you can put yourself on a different path. For many of our kids, what they see is the quickest way to money is doing illegal activity. We need to show them there's a longer term vision for this, that invest in your education and you actually live a much more comfortable lifestyle long term.
I think that the faith community can play a critical role in prison reentry. The faith community needs to think more creatively and more cooperatively about how we can help people to re-enter into society and have better outcomes.
I think the most important thing that we can do to communities is to get mobilized to reduce mass incarceration, is to make sure that people know that mass incarceration is preventable and that they can do something about it and it's not hopeless.
We have to make sure that everyone understands that this is a part of their issue. I think right now most people think somebody over there will fix this.
Whatever actions they're taking today, it's going to affect them for the rest of their lives.
So when we talk about what's happening to young Black and Latino boys, we're talking about what's going to happen to America. It's important for all of us.
It affects us all. So if you think that you want to live in a safe neighborhood, if you want your children to go to a quality schools, if you care about the future of the state or the country that you live in, then you need to care about incarceration rates.
We find ways to educate young boys. We find that all of that energy and aggressiveness that ends up making them criminals will make them creative leaders and responsible citizens.